Hello and welcome back to another episode of Being Woodworking. My name's Doug. Today I'm going to show you a video of something that I've never done before. I've never made cutting boards. So it's time to try my hand at it. It's kind of funny. I've made tables that I've sold for $3,000 plus, but I've never really made anything of the smalls. So cutting boards it is. So you just saw me cutting down some hard maple, and then you saw some walnut going across the joiner. Now that's all the joiner footage you're going to get because the rest of it's out of focus. And now I'm going over to the planer, sending all my boards through. Want to get them nice, true, and flat. Then once I've gone from the joiner to the planer, now it's time to rip them on the table saw. I'm ripping all these to about 1 3/4 inches. And what you see here at the top is the face grain. I'm going to be making edge grain cutting boards, which means I'll be turning these sideways, and that'll be the grain that faces us. So hence edge grain. There's basically 3 types of cutting boards you can make. You can make face grain, you can make edge grain, you can make end grain. And the difficulty and the value goes up with each one. Face grain being the simplest and arguably the least valuable. I'm not going into the end grain just yet. I'm going to do the edge grain. So here I've been cutting up some Paduak. This is purpleheart, but I got to say that red board that you saw me cut before, that's Paduak, and this is my first time ever working with it, and what a pleasure it's been. It's amazing the smell that wood puts off when you sand it, when you cut it, when you work it. It smells like a cross between like baby powder and perfume. It's really, really weird. And it's really fun to work with. So there I was cutting up some of the walnut. So I've got a mixture of walnut, hard maple, Paduak, and purpleheart. And I'm going to throw together several boards. I don't know how much it's going to take for each one. I guess I could have sat down and done some simple math, but I just started cutting boards until I figured I had enough for several. And now I'm going to make them. So I got my clamps ready here. And if you look closely, you'll see a nice little trick. I put down a piece of wax paper over the clamps so that when I put all this glue on here, because you got to glue the crud out of these cutting boards. You don't want any gaps where there's not any glue. So glue them up, and then when that squeeze out comes, instead of getting a bunch of glue on my clamps, it just goes on the wax paper, and I just peel that off. So I'm using Titebond 3. It's waterproof and it's food safe. So, well, it's not food safe. You don't want to consume it, but food can touch it and be safe. So I'm spreading this out with a silicone baster that you can get from any of the stores or online anywhere. They're really cheap. They're really easy. I can put the glue on here. I can let it dry, and then I can peel that glue right off of there and keep reusing it. So it's really useful to have. Now after I've got my glue spread out, I'm going to start bringing them and flipping them so that the edge grain is facing up. That means I'm gluing the face grains together. So you can see the wax paper really good there. And I've laid these out ahead of time, dry fitting them and just figuring out a color scheme that I wanted to go with. I also wanted to make sure that there were no knot holes or anything that I would need to fill with epoxy or super glue under my normal projects, because you don't want that with a cutting board. You don't want stuff that's not going to be food safe touching your food. So I really wanted at least the front side of these, or the top side, to be pretty much perfect. If there was a small imperfection on the back side that I had to work on, that's okay, because I'm putting legs on the back anyways. So as I'm starting to clamp down on these, you can see the glue squeeze out coming out there on the top. That's perfect. That's what we want to see. That means that we've got good glue coverage down there in between the seams, the joints. And you let that dry for a little while. Now you can try to clean it up while it's wet, and you can wait till it dries and you can try to clean it up that way. I do something in the middle, if at all possible, if I time it right. Here it's almost dry, just kind of gummy, and I take a normal paint scraper and get after it. and it really cuts down on the amount of work that I have to do later. After removing the majority of the glue, I take it over to my crosscut sled. I don't have a sliding miter saw, so these are way too wide for me to try to do on that. So the table saw is going to have to do it. I get at least one good clean edge, and then I turn it. And I have a 13-inch planer, so I'm also going to check the width, and if I need to trim that down some, I'm going to pretty much try to get it so that the outside pieces are equal. And here you see me trimming off a little piece to get that. Now it's back over to one of my favorite tools, the planer. I'm going to take it into the planer, and I'm just going to get it to where it just barely grabs on that first pass. And then I'm going to send them through and keep on going until I get a nice even cut along the entire board. So that's the goal. I'll keep checking them and keep sending them through. So these boards come out of the planer pretty smooth already, but it's time to go through the sanding and go up the grits. So with it being so smooth, I did not start at 80. I started at 120. I go over them, each one both ways with the 120. Then I move up to the 150. Then I move up to the 180. I was debating on whether or not to go up to 220, and well, my wife talked me into it, so we went up to 220. And these boards weren't planed down to the same thickness for each one, so they're each just a little different, so I couldn't just stack them up side by side and sand them. So I put a little space between them, and then I put a spacer on the end and clamped those down, and I was kind of proud of this on how easy it made it to sand all of them without having to stop and adjust each time that I moved to a different board. Once I flipped them over, sanded them on that, then it's time for my favorite part of every project. Then it's time for the finish. For the finish, I decided to use Odie's oil, and it's food safe. It's a really easy application. You just about cannot screw it up. Trust me, if there's a way, I would have found it by now. So each of these boards, like this one right here, that's walnut, maple, and purple heart. The one before that had a little bit of everything in it with some Paduak in there. The Paduak can be a bright orange or it can be a dark maroon. So those two red pieces of board in the middle of this one, that's Paduak, along with maple and then walnut on the outside. I think this one is probably my favorite one. I just like the way this one looks. It feels balanced. It feels comfortable to look at. It's beautiful. I gave it away for Mother's Day. I gave one to my wife. I gave one to my mom. I gave one to my mother-in-law. And my mother-in-law got that one, and she pretty much says that she's afraid to use it, that she thinks it's too pretty and might end up hanging it on the wall. So I'm pretty honored to hear her say that. So I may have to make her one that's better than that one so that she uses that one and hangs the other one on the wall. I don't know. There's some kind of strategy in there. So this one has Paduak in the middle, purple hearts on the outside. And this board right here, if you saw it when I sent it through the planer, it looked a little odd. This one was made with complete offcuts. And I honestly screwed up on it. So when I did the glue up, neither side was flush. They was all had a little bit of offset. And therefore, when I sent it through the planer, I should have used a sled, and I didn't. So it's got a little twist to it. You can actually see it moving while I'm trying to put the finish on there. But it still came out beautiful. It's just a shame that it's got just a slight twist to it. I may have to shim up the feet or figure out a way to do that, or just give it away for free to somebody else. I don't know. We'll figure it out. All in all, I was surprised at the amount of work that went into making these. It was a lot of milling. If you're going to make these yourself, you just need to have good wood to work with. And if you start off with rough lumber, you're going to have a lot of work ahead of you. I was actually kind of nervous making these. Like I said, I've made tables before that have gone for thousands of dollars, but I've never made something small like this. And I was surprised at the amount of anxiety that it gave me tackling this job. But it was fun. I plan on making more. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. If you did, please give me the like and the subscribe. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.